Okay, you picking it up? Okay. Here we are doing our first Law for Dummies. And you'd say, how can Joe do Law for Dummies? Well, Joe's been a dummy as far as the law goes for many years of his life. And it took a lot of mistakes in order to learn some of the things that I'm going to tell you. So I've been a dummy, and probably I don't still know it all when it comes to law, and I'm still going to be a dummy towards some things. But I can tell you some of the things that I've learned, and I'd like to start with how our legal system came to be, or is supposed to be. The founding fathers, people may say, oh, they were a bunch of rich aristocrats, but they had just dealt with the king, and they knew what a tyrant and an oppressor was doing. They had had it all done to them. So they decided, they wrote the Declaration of Independence, which said, we separate ourselves from you, and we are going to rule ourselves. But we are going to rule ourselves as an independent people. We the people, right? So that said, when you have a king, you have a sovereign, and the sovereign makes law. That's, if the king says, this is the law, you can't hunt in my field, and if you hunt in my field, I'm going to chop off your head. The king can do that because he's a sovereign. Well, the founding fathers decided we didn't want kings in this country. We wanted presidents that were answerable to the people, right? So they set up a constitution for us, and which laid out that was, we the people made a contract with the people that we were going to be putting in power, in authority. We the people gave them the authority. Remember that. That's key to law. The people in this country give the authority to presidents, to politicians, to judges, to everybody. We give them authority, right? We have, as people, have inalienable rights. They're either employees or corporations, like most of the courts and counties are all incorporated. So, the founding fathers knew from having dealt with tyrants that they had to protect the people from tyranny here. So first they started with the Declaration of Independence. Then they later realized, well, we need a constitution because we need a government, but we need a way to keep the government in line. So when they laid out the Constitution, they were specific. They delegated, we the people delegated to different politicians specific powers. And as in the Constitution of the United States, each politician, like the president, was delegated specific powers, right? Those powers were enumerated in the Constitution. It said, you can do this, 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 and this. But there are things that it said, it doesn't say you can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. So the presidents have assumed a lot of authority that really wasn't delegated to them. The same thing with the Senate and the Congress. The Constitution said, we the people, we're only going to give you so much power in order for the country to work right. We're going to give you the rights to do, the authority to do certain things. But any authority, anything that they're doing that wasn't specifically laid out in the Constitution, that you have this authority, is the authority usurped. It was not given by the people, right? Okay, that's one of the key points in law, that we the people didn't necessarily give all these politicians the authorities that they're now holding over us. Now, how they do that, now we're going to start going into law, right? There's two kinds of basic law in our well, first of all, let me go back to the Constitution and the Supreme Court. Let me do that first. The Constitution also had 10 amendments. Those 10 amendments, we the people, have inalienable rights. But the framers said, well, we have more rights than we're going to enumerate, but we want to enumerate the important ones just to make sure that they don't get violated by those we put in charge. Those are specific ones like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. Those were made by the founding fathers. They said, well, we got to make sure these are protected, and other rights they left up to our other inalienable rights, the ones that they didn't enumerate, they left up to the Supreme Court. We the people, that was one of the charges that we gave the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is supposed to, let's say some big corporation, oh, I got a good one, we got the people who make the smart meters. Who's that again? Oh, Central Hudson. Central Hudson now says that they can put smart meters on our house that are harmful to us, and if that smart meter malfunctions and burns down our house, they can't be held responsible because they're a corporation, and they supposedly said, well, we printed it in the paper, but all this was fraudulent. So we the people can challenge that on fraud, and if any harm is done, there's no immunities under our Constitution for harming someone, no matter what they kind of hocus pocus with their legal law and their lawyers. There's no, under our Constitution, there's no legal authority to do harm. Like the President of the United States, under our Constitution, could never declare war on the American people. That's treason. The people give the power of the Constitution. The people wrote the Constitution. The people delegated the authority to the President. So the President's only acting under the authority that the people give him. The people would never give him the authority to make war on the people, right? But our politicians have run this scam. Oh, it's the war on drugs. It's the war on poverty. They can always call it some kind of war, but it's a war. All those are wars on the people, and they're all fraudulent acts been done by our presidents. But back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gets authority from we the people. And the authority we gave the Supreme Court is any challenges to our rights should be heard by the Supreme Court. If, say, a TV station is violating your right to, or say some politicians are violating your right to free speech, right? You would take that case to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court would look at the Constitution and they would say, do politicians have the authority to limit speech? Well, I can tell you right now, the Supreme Court's ruled on that many times, and no, politicians do not have the right under our Constitution to limit free speech, which, by the way, is going on here in Woodstock. The politicians are limiting our rights to free speech. Also, they're limiting our rights to freedom of the press, for us to be able to tell you the things that politicians are doing wrong. Okay, but that's back to the Supreme Court again. Now, anytime there's two kinds of law. I'll go back to that first. There's two kinds of law. There's lawful things done under lawful authority, and then there's legal. Now, legal is hocus pocus stuff, a lot of it, right? Because lawful goes is challenged with our Constitution. Everything has to be lawful according to our Constitution.
And the Bible.
What?
And the Bible.
And the Bible, and not just the Bible, but every religious book. The Jewish book is the law. The Christian book, Jesus was teaching the law. Even the Hindus and the yogis and all those others, almost all religions are based on law. So there is a truth in law, and that's called lawful. Even the Bible says you don't have a right to harm your fellow man, and Buddha would say the same thing, and it doesn't matter. The law is the law, and it's a universal. right? But when you say, we now have legal, now legal is a bunch of politicians meeting in a back room to make rules to profit from, most of the time, or to enslave, right? So they can, a bunch of politicians can meet in a room and say, oh, we just made a statute. Statutes are not law. All statutes can be challenged to the Supreme Court under constitutional challenge of that statute violates your right. Like, let's say, marijuana. For thousands of years, people have smoked marijuana without going in jail. You know, if you talk about in law things being grandfathered in, that herb has been used by shaman, by mystics, and by just people to enjoy life, going back to cavemen. Believe it or not, they even found seeds in one of the oldest frozen cavemen. In his little pouch, they found marijuana seeds. So we can prove a long chain of that being an inalienable right. All of a sudden, some politicians came along and said, you know what, we can profit if we make this illegal. Illegal. See what I'm saying? There's lawful and illegal. Illegal is not lawful.
Yeah.
So what they do is they say, well, we're going to make these rules, we'll make it illegal, and then we'll be able to find these people, and we'll be able to put them in jail, and we'll have a slave class, you know. And most people didn't challenge it. I didn't know when they first started busting me to challenge it this way. But after, you know, like I said, this is law for dummies. I did a lot of dumb things, but now I've learned how to challenge these people. You challenge, first of all, they call you in as a defendant. You say, no, well, there's a mistake here. I'm not the defendant. I am the victim. You are a victim of an unjust statute. It's not law. They call it legal, but it's not law. It has to be challenged against the constitutionality of it, which is legal. Which is lawful. So all these politicians just get together and they make these rules, and like they tell you, you have to have a driver's license. Wait a minute. In the days when we all traveled by foot, foot was the mode of travel. And everyone recognized it was a right to freely travel unhampered, except, you know, when you went through king's territories, they made the rules so they could charge you a tax going through. But basically, before we had kings, it was an inalienable right to travel freely, right? Then kings came along and said, you can't, you got to pay to travel down my road. Well, then we had the revolution, and the people said, no, it's now all our roads, and we don't have to pay, and we have a right to freely travel. And we would walk wherever we wanted to go. Then we got horses, and we could ride wherever we wanted to go. And then we got wagons, covered wagons, and we could go further, and you know, that was the modern day camper of the Old West, right? And we went wherever we wanted to go, and you could freely travel wherever you wanted to go. And you didn't put a license on your horse's ass, so that, you know, or seat belts on the saddle. That all came along when these politicians said, well, how can we capitalize on this? Well, let's tell them, instead of their right to travel, since they're traveling by automobile, well, what's the difference? If the mode of travel started out as feet, then the mode of travel came to be horses, then the mode of travel went to be covered wagons. Then we went to what was called the horseless carriage. And when the horseless carriage first came, it was accepted as the mode of travel. Nobody got licenses. Everybody drove where they wanted, right? Then some politicians said, no. We're going to say you have to have a license. When the people bought that, the people allowed themselves to, if you don't contest something in law, you're assumed to have agreed with it. Like if you were in court and let's say the prosecutor said, you broke the neighbor's windows, when you actually didn't break the neighbor's windows, But if you remain silent, the judge only hears the prosecutor saying, you broke the windows. But if you say, he's out of his mind, I wasn't even there, I didn't break the windows, I got witnesses on my behalf. If you dispute what he says, then the judge has to balance the facts. But if you don't dispute what they say, then it's assumed through your silence that you acquiesce to their authority. So that's what I learned. People think I'm a bit aggressive in court, but I learned if you don't assume your own authority and be an authority, like when they arrest me for stuff, I don't say, ooh, I'm the defendant, how am I going to defend myself? I say, by what right do you do this? I'm the victim. You're using this, you're not using what's lawful, you're pulling this legal scam. You know, Hitler said, to pass a law, that the Jews were less than human beings, and therefore it was okay to exterminate them. He took away their rights, but that might have been lawful because he was the president of the country and he could get the Senate or the Congress or whatever they had to go along with it, and they could pass a statute or a law, right? But checked against what's really lawful as opposed to what was legal, that would never fly. That wouldn't fly from any religion, that anybody had the right to exterminate a race of people. That wouldn't fly. That wouldn't fly with Christianity, wouldn't fly with Muslim, wouldn't fly with Buddhist, wouldn't fly with any of them. Wouldn't fly with Christianity. Well, they disguise it with Christianity. They say it's okay to bomb all these Muslims because they're our enemy, and they create enemies. People need to wake up and learn the difference between legal and lawful. Right now, a lot of what our leaders are doing, they call it legal, but it's not lawful. You know, they may find some way to say, oh, the president has authority to use drones to kill citizens because the president said so and Congress went along with it. But they did not have, under our form of government, they did not have lawful authority to do that. The American people never granted that. We never granted that. Read the Constitution. That was never granted in the Constitution. That's authority assumed by them. And it's time for we the people to challenge that authority. Now, you really need to learn, especially if you're going into courts, to challenge always, first of all, the statute is unconstitutional, right? It violates your constitutional rights. Secondly, because it violates your constitutional rights, they have no jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is what's important in court cases. Let me explain a little about jurisdiction. Legally, lawfully, I mean, a court would have jurisdiction to hear certain cases about people and things. That's personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. You know, people is personal, and subject matter jurisdiction is the subject, what it's about, or usually it more than likely would be in commerce, or damage of property, or things like that, right? There would be property of some kind more than likely involved. And sometimes they consider people property. That's something you got to understand in law and make it clear that you are one of the people and you're a citizen of the state. If you say you are a federal citizen or a citizen of the United States, you've just given up all your rights, the way they've done this hocus pocus scam of legal and lawful, you know? You fall under lawful and subject to, you fall under legal and subject to all legal, which is any rules they make up when you say, I am a citizen of the United States, because the United States isn't what you think. It's not the 50 states united. It's a corporation called the United States of America. So now you've just given jurisdiction to a corporation, not to the Supreme Court. So you need to know that the difference between that whenever you walk into court. And it took me a long time to learn a lot of this stuff, you know. You have to go into court as a state citizen of whatever state you are. Like for me, right now, I am a state citizen of New York. Not a New York state citizen, because again, that's a corporation. I'm a state citizen of New York, right? And I have the rights as a flesh and blood. They put your name in, when you go into court, on any documents, anytime they document you, your name's in all capital letters. Look on your driver's license, all capital letters. Look on your birth certificate, all capital letters. Look on your Social Security card, all capital letters. They created a corporation in your name. That's that. All capital letters is either a corporation in law or a dead person. Go in any cemetery and look at all the tombstones. Every tombstone has the name of the person in all capital letters. That's a dead person. Or a corporation, because it's not a living human being. It's not a living flesh and blood man or woman. So they've turned you into a corporation on your birth certificate, your driver's license, all that stuff, if you agree to it, right? Now, as a corporation, the head corporation, which is the United States government or the county or the state of, when they charge you with a charge, the people of the state of New York, that's the whole bullshit thing they're running on you there. The people of the state of New York are not charging you. The politicians that want to pick your pockets are charging you, and they're using a corporation called the people of the state of New York. You know, your neighbor ain't in there saying, oh, he smokes pot. You know, I mean, you know, the community don't get together, 12 jurors come in and go, he smoked pot, we want to lock him up. No, some politician came up with that, you know, and then he uses the people of the state of New York as his authority, like Nixon used, oh, the silent majority is with me. What he was saying is, those people that are too wimpy and too lazy to speak up, I can do what I want, because by their acquiescence, by them not speaking up, I have the authority to do it, because the silence is consent. So Nixon scammed everybody to do a lot of illegal stuff, saying the silent majority is with me. That was one of the biggest scams of that was one of the first. That was early. They've all learned to use that, by the way. And he also said if the president does it, it's legal. Well, what he means is if the president does it and the people don't challenge him, it's legal. But he didn't say that. He didn't give you the other half, because a lot of the people would have challenged him, you know. But I got off on a tyrant here. You want to take a break, and I got to remember where I pick up from. We're going to be doing this in parts because I had to take a break, and I hope I can pick up where I left off. But I was talking to you about lawful and legal. Now, when you go into courts, they're always charging you with legal stuff. All that legal stuff can be challenged, and two ways to challenge it is, one, their statute violates your constitutional right, depending on what the statute is. Let's say the statute violates your right to free speech. So you're arguing, one, that statute violates my right to free speech, therefore that statute has no authority. When you're saying it has no authority, you're now saying that court has no jurisdiction in this matter. Neither personal jurisdiction nor subject matter. You know, you got this rule that says that I can't use free speech. Well, I know that I have a constitutional right, and a right can't be denied. A right can't be denied, so I can, with impunity, without being punished in any way, assert that right. I have a right to free speech, and your statute punishes that right. Therefore, that statute has no authority. It has no jurisdiction. No court has jurisdiction to apply that statute against your right to free speech. Are you seeing the simplicity of this, people? 90% of the statutes these guys made was all the way to pick your pocket, all the way to take your money, all the way to enslave you, all the way to control you. When you challenge it constitutionally, and you say, no, I am not the defendant, I am the victim of a statute created fraudulently to violate my rights. And the court has no authority to try me on this, right? And you say right to the judge, any rulings you make are void, not voidable, but void from their inception. So don't take it any further because you have no authority. Always challenge their authority. And authority is, what's the word again? Paula.
Inalienable?
No, jurisdiction. If you don't give them jurisdiction over you, they don't have jurisdiction over a personal, especially over you as a person. But if you claim to be a United States citizen and you then put yourself in that category.
It's a man or a woman, not a person.
Right, oh yeah, not a person, right. You don't want to be a person. You're a man or a woman, flesh and blood. Paul is right on that. I keep her around to keep me straight. I know it, I just don't always put it out right. She gets me.
Subject matter jurisdiction and personal jurisdiction.
Right, the subject matter, subject jurisdiction, that's of the subject, and personal jurisdiction, right? Never give them personal jurisdiction. Always challenge it every step of the way. We the people have more power than the politicians. The politicians are employees. The judges are employees. The clerks are employees. Oh, let's go to clerks. I love clerks. You go to a clerk and you want to file your paperwork, and the clerk says, I don't want to take your paperwork. Or say, for example, the judge, all right, here's a good one. When two sides come into court to dispute, if one side don't show up, the judge always gives a ruling, or is supposed to give a ruling, of default. Like, the landlord's telling you got to get out of your apartment, and he goes into court. If you don't go into court, then the judge has no choice but to rule for the landlord and say, you didn't show up to defend yourself, so obviously you don't have a defense. So I'm going to give it to the landlord, and he has a right to evict you, right? Because you didn't go into court.
The clerk defaulted it.
Right, well actually, a judge can do it or a clerk, but a clerk is supposed to do it, right? So let's say you got a ruling in your favor, or you go into court and you got all the winning tickets, right? And the other side don't show up, like in mine and Paula's case. Twice they didn't show up in court. The landlord, the supposed whoever was trying to evict us, right? Twice didn't show up in the court, and twice we asked the clerk to default them. Now the clerk didn't default them. We went before the judge. The judge didn't default them. We asked the judge to default them. She didn't, right? Now the clerk and the judge are now acting under what's called color of law. They say color of law. Just because you have a robe on, don't mean everything you say is law. The color of law means you're ruling as a tyrant. Color of law. It's not law. It's colorable. Colorable means shaky, dishonest. It could be colorable, It ain't black and white, it's in multicolors, Okay, now truth is in black and white. Okay, you're getting it about colorable law here, people? Now, both the judge and the clerk acted under color of law, which is actually illegal. You know, if a police officer acts under color of law, you can get the papers thrown out of court. He didn't act with his legal authority. For example, if a police officer comes to you and arrests you. Now, under our Constitution, in order to have an arrest, you have to have a warrant. A warrant. And the warrant has to be issued upon probable cause. Now, what is probable cause? Probable cause is there has to be a harmed party. If there's no harmed party, no one to sign an affidavit of truth and fact, when you go into court, say, well, where's the affidavit of truth and fact? Where's the harmed party? Not this police officer just said, the people of the state of New York said, I'm going to arrest you. Wait a minute. There's no harmed party. There's no warrant for my arrest. But yet that police officer will arrest you and drag you down to the local court. Now you don't know to say, wait a minute, that was false arrest. He didn't have a warrant. But most of you people out there, no, they drag you down. You think, oh, the police is acting within his authority. The courts are acting within their authority. They don't have this authority, folks. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's Law 101. Hello, people. They don't have the authority, the lawful authority, to do the things they're doing. And they can call it legal and call it statutes. Statutes are not lawful. They got to be challenged against it. You have to bring it up. You have to say, no, everything you're doing is unlawful. If you go in as the defendant, you'll always be defending yourself. If you go in as the victim, these statutes victimize you. You get a challenge all the way to the Supreme Court. You get to challenge their jurisdiction. They can't just lock you up and do what they want with you. But you always got to make it clear you're not that name in all capital letters. You're a flesh and blood man or a flesh and blood woman, you know? And that's what you have to do any time you deal with any of these courts. And there's two kinds of courts. There's the Supreme Court, which rules always on the constitutionality of something. They're not going to get involved in bickering between people or corporate arguments or stuff like that. They're only going to get involved when it violates someone's rights according to the Constitution. Or when someone has overstepped, like the President of the United States is now using authority or created a fictitious authority that he was never given under our Constitution. Our Constitution was completely precise on saying the President has these powers to do this. Congress has these powers to do this. Now, let's talk about the powers that the Constitution gave these different groups. When we, the people, delegate authority, in other words, we own the building, we put a super in charge. We now have a superintendent that's going to take care of our building. We tell the superintendent specifically what we want the superintendent to do. Turn on the heat at such and such a time, turn off the heat at such and such a time. In the summertime, sweep the leaves from the porch. In the wintertime, clean the snow. We make all these, we give authority to that super to do specific jobs. The Constitution laid out specifically what the president does. Our presidents are way over the line on what they have authority to do. They're doing many, many things they do not have the authority to do. Our Senate and Congress had the specific allocated. We the people in the Constitution, gave them specific authority to do certain things. When they make laws to violate us, they never had the authority to do that, because we delegate the authority to them. They work for us, we the people, right? So now it's going to take all of we the people. That's why I'm doing this for Dummies. Every one of you people out there have to start taking a stand for whatever right of yours they're violating. But you need to challenge it. You know, if every one of us, we're all being violated one way or another. Some they're given tickets because we're driving and we violated some made-up rules they made. I was telling you before in the first half part of this, we had a right to walk. We had a right to ride a horse. We had a right to have a covered wagon. We had a right to have horseless carriages. That was the first cars. Now all of a sudden, we got to get a license. We got to put a license plate on our car, and we got to follow rules. And the rules they made were so they could give us tickets so they could pick our pockets. Nobody went by a covered wagon and said, "You're riding on the wrong side of the road. Here's a ticket. You got to pay a fine." You know what I mean?
They dropped in.
Right.
Are you crazy?
Right. He would have pulled out his gun and said, "Boy, get the fuck out of here." You know what I mean? That was a free American. Wake up, people. Now what we got to do is all of us. This is a country, we the people. And if we the people don't fix it, it's only going to get worse. And if you think Hillary or Trump are going to not abuse the authority that we have delegated to them.
Track records very good.
Right, both their track records are looking pretty poor, people, And there's a lot of people out there who say, "Oh, I'm going to vote for Hillary because we don't want Trump." You know what I mean? Hillary's just bad. And then you got people out there saying, "We got to vote for Trump because we don't want Hillary." Folks, which hand do you want me to slap you with? Yeah, get it? That's what they're offering you. You want to be slapped with a right hand or you want to be slapped with a left hand? Duh. You're going to get slapped. How about we say, we don't want to get slapped. We don't want to get slapped anymore. We want to pull them back to the authority that was delegated to them. We don't need a violent revolution. We don't need a police state. That's our two options right now if we the people don't speak up. Either we have a revolution because the tyrants have taken control of us, or we have a police state because the tyrants have complete control. That's our two choices. And it's not Hillary or Trump. It's either we stand up and fix the problem, or that's the two problems. We're going to have one or the other, either violent revolution or a police state. Now, we can stop both of those. We the people can now hold all those politicians, all those bankers, where they've been busting the kids for pot. We should be busting the criminals that have been running this country, that have usurped our form of government. We should be busting them for treason. Because that's the facts, folks. They've created real treason here. No longer do we have a free people. We have an enslaved populace. And they have destroyed by design the economics of this country. And if you think Hillary or Trump are going to fix it, they're not. We the people have to fix it. We have to say, we have to challenge all those statutes, not the lawful stuff. We got to bring all that unlawful action lawful. That's the revolution that we have to have. And it has to be in the courts, and the first thing we need are honest courts. So the first place that we the people should focus all our energy is getting these criminal judges off the bench. When we get these criminal judges off the bench, and then second, we got to get these criminals out of politics that are just picking our pockets. Are you done paying the taxes? Well, if we don't get rid of these politicians that are just picking our pockets and get some politicians in there that are doing what we give them the authority to do, and that's protect our interests. Right? The politicians are we give them authority to watch out for us, to protect us, not to violate us, not to create laws so they can pick our pockets, not to excessively tax us, not to ship our jobs overseas, not like Con Edison. We the people paid taxes. They took those taxes back when Edison wanted to start the Edison Company, And they funded, because Edison didn't have the money for generators, big generators, and he didn't have the money to run wires all over where we have wires, right? So the federal government with our tax dollars and the state government with our tax dollars financed that. That means we the people were the largest shareholders in that company. Now, the politicians that we hired to watch out for our interests didn't watch out for our interests and say, okay, now the people own cheap electricity and all we got to do is pay some guys to keep it running and everybody could have cheap electricity. No, what they did was they sold, fraudulently, they sold Con Edison to a private corporation. They just sold what they didn't have the right to sell, what they didn't own. That belonged to we the people. Now, when they've done that with our reservoirs, they've done that with our highways, they've done that with everything in this country. Our tunnels. When I was a kid, you paid $1.25 to get through the tunnel that my parents and grandparents paid for, and that tunnel was paid for. So I only paid $1.25 because there was upkeep for the tunnel. Now it's $30 to go through the tunnel. Hello, folks. The reason it's $30 is because they sold our tunnel. The price should have come down, except for maintenance. The price should have come down on that tunnel because it was paid for 50, 60 years ago. The same thing with Con Edison. We would have owned Con Edison, we'd all be getting cheap electricity. But the politicians, in scheming with the rich fat cats, the bankers, right, said, okay, now we're going to sell what the people just paid for. Now they sell Con Edison, the people's company, to a private corporation. Now the private corporation says, well, we got to supply you with electricity, so we got to raise your bill. And every generation, or every, say, 10 or 20 years, they just raise it, because the next group of people isn't going to complain. They accepted that first ripoff, so they'll accept the second ripoff, and they'll accept the third ripoff, until we rip them off so much that they can't afford electricity. Hello, folks. Look at what's going on. You know, it's time to challenge. Now, these politicians that sold that company did not have authority from we the people to sell what we the people own in common. We the people own a lot in common. Politicians can't turn around all our national forests. We the people own in common. There's much land that we the people own in common. Well, that doesn't mean that the politicians can now say, okay, we're going to give the mining company a right to go in and take stuff out of this land. And we the people didn't get anything from that mining company coming in and mining on the common. But the politicians got some payoffs. All this was criminal, people. It's time for us to start speaking up and calling it what it is. We got to bring the bankers that stole the wealth of this nation to justice. 20 million homes were foreclosed illegally in this country. That's 20 million families put out illegally in this country.
Unlawfully and
I meant unlawfully, illegally, and illegally actually. Using legal hocus pocus, they scam most people because they don't know their rights. And what they did was not lawful. It might have, in some cases, it might have even been legal. But they wrote these legal laws so that they can get away with criminal activity.
You're legally an enemy under the War Powers Act.
Right. And as Paula just pointed out, they have the War Powers Act, and legally they can say you're a criminal under the War Powers Act without you have. That's all you people out there in television land. You know, they can all say that any one of you is illegal under the War Powers Act, and under the War Powers Act, they can hold you as a prisoner, an enemy of the state, and as an enemy of the state, you have no rights. That's how they're doing a lot of this to people. I'm glad Paula brought that up. You know, it's time for you people.
So you rebut that you're an enemy.
Right. It's time for people to rebut. Say, I am not an enemy of the state, an enemy of the federal government. You know, I am of flesh and blood.
I'm born here.
Right, I'm born here. You are a foreign entity. And they are a foreign entity. We, the people, control this country. We made the Constitution, we the people. That's the authority that we give. So if we have the power, like the king in England makes the law. Well, he doesn't anymore. He kind of still does, because he's the king. He owns everything. But in this country, we took it from the king, and we said, we the people own this land. We the people rule this land. But since we the people got, the farmer got to grow vegetables and the lumberman got to cut trees, so we're going to appoint some politicians, some people to run a government so we can function. That was what we gave them authority under the Constitution. We did not give them the authority to do it. They're using. And unless we the people challenge what they're doing by saying, you have no authority under our Constitution, you might say it's legal, but it's not lawful. And to go to the Supreme Court, you have to argue lawful and legal, and say legal is unconstitutional. That's very simple, basic, 101 law, and the Constitution says when it comes to bringing you into court, they have to follow specifics. Read the Constitution. They have to have a warrant to bring you, to charge you. And in order to have a warrant to charge you, they have to have a signed sworn affidavit by a harmed party, not by the people of the state of. That's a scam. Anytime you're being charged by the people of the state of New York, you say, what people? I want these people on the stand, and I want them to say how they've been harmed. I'm a victim here, and this is hocus pocus you're playing with here, the people of the state of New York. How have I harmed the people of the state of New York? And I have a right under our Constitution to face my accuser. If the people of the state of New York are accusing me of a crime, I want a signed sworn affidavit from the people of the state of New York, and I want the people of the state of New York on the stand so I can cross-examine them. I have a right to that under our Constitution. Boy, does that blow judges' minds when you go there, folks. It took me a long time to learn this stuff, and many, many times I didn't know what to say, and my silence let them get away with what they get away with. And don't trust your lawyer. Say, oh, I got a lawyer. A lawyer will, first of all, let me tell you in law what a lawyer is. All right. You're in a crazy house. You're considered insane. They got you locked in an insane asylum, but you're charged with a crime. So now they got to bring you to court for the crime. Let's say there was someone you shot someone, or they're claiming you shot someone, right? You're in a nut house. You're nutty. How can you defend yourself? Well, you can't defend yourself. You're an incompetent. You're nutty. You're in a nut house. You're violent, and how the judge don't want to have you in court. You might attack the judge or one of the jury, So they got to say, well, all right, he's an incompetent to stand trial, so we're going to appoint someone to protect his rights and to take care of him. And they appoint a lawyer. But wait a minute. If you find out what are the loyalties of the lawyer? First of all, the lawyer is a member of the Bar Association. That's a private organization. Now, his first loyalty is to the Bar Association. He's one of the boys in the club, and the boys in the club all stick together. His second important authority that he has authority to is the judge. So if the judge wants to know something or something, he has the authority to the court. Then he has the authority to his client. His priorities are 1, 2, and the client is 3. So that's his priorities. But now he's been put to be your lawyer because you're incompetent, because you're in the nut house, right? So now you become award of the court because you are incompetent. So someone has to speak for you. You can't speak for yourself. We have to have this guy to speak for you. Now, because you're incompetent, and this guy's competent, supposedly. I don't think any lawyers are competent, but that's another story. So this lawyer is supposed to be competent, and the crazy person is incompetent. So now the competent person has to make a deal with the judge and the prosecutor. They have to decide, the three of them, bar attorneys, have to decide what they're going to do with this incompetent person. So even if you're paying your lawyer to get, you think he's going to save me. No, you're an incompetent. He's getting paid by you. The judge is getting paid. The prosecutor's getting paid to decide what they're going to do with this incompetent. Okay, now you got that with the crazy person. Well, the crazy person couldn't speak for himself because he wasn't competent, so they had to have a lawyer. If you take a lawyer, the judge and prosecutor and the lawyer all assume you are incompetent to speak for yourself. Therefore, the lawyer is going to make some kind of deal. And it's, believe me, any deal he's going to make is to the advantage of him, the court, and the prosecutor, not in your best interest. You are third on the totem pole, right? So now, if you go into court with a lawyer, how many of you people out there have gone into court with a lawyer? The lawyer's saying stuff, but he didn't study the case. You know the case. You know the facts. You say, but Your Honor. And the judge will go, quiet, don't say nothing. You have a lawyer. What he's saying is, you're incompetent. I can't hear anything you're saying. You are a blank screen to me. I got to listen to him. I don't care that you have the rent receipts. He didn't say you have the rent receipts. Shut up and let him talk. And he'll go back to talking and won't bring up the rent receipts.
Because he's making me money and you're not.
Right, because he's making me money and you're not. And the landlord is paying big money to bring this case. So since he's the guy paying for the case, shut up. I don't want to hear from you and your rent receipts. I want to talk to the prosecutor who ain't going to talk about rent receipts. People, check out what's going on in our courts. If you don't stand, I never go into court with a lawyer. First of all, I go in there, I'm a flesh and blood, living man. I'm not that all capital person. And I intend to be here and assert every right I have. Right from the start I go in there and I say, and just the fact that you brought me in here, I'm being victimized. You do not have the authority to do what you're doing. It's all been made up under color of law. All the statutes are under color of law. How many minutes we have on this?
10 more.
10 more what? For an hour or for?
8 more minutes.
Anyway, folks, that's law for dummies. And I can truly say, as a dummy, they've got me on all these things. But once they punch you, you know that they're going to punch you that way again. So after dummies like me have been punched and punched and punched, you figure out what they're punching you with. And you know what? When I figured out that they're punching me with bullshit, with hot air, with authority they don't have, with rules they didn't have the authority to make. When you go into court and you look at the judge and you know you're talking to a criminal, not all judges are criminals, by the way, but the ones that overstep, the ones that are trying to squeeze you, they're criminals. I never paint anything with a one color brush. There's a lot of good judges. But there's more corrupt judges than there are honest judges. And that's what we got to change in this country. We got to get the corrupt judges off the bench. We got to get the more honest judges on the bench. We need judges that are going to go with lawful first and not legal. you know? And legal is making a lot of these judges money, and it's their scam, and it's part of their corruption. These judges are not legal, they're not lawful. Everything they're doing is under color of law, and it's void, not voidable. And you should challenge it to that. I argue with judges, you know, and I like to get judges, and people who've been with me in court know. They say, Joe, how do you keep getting these judges so pissed off and you don't wind up in jail? Not because I'm smart. I get them so mad that they overstep. And then I say, excuse me, Your Honor, I'm only here for marijuana. You know, you just committed all kinds of felonies from the bench, even treason from the bench. Therefore, you have no authority here. You've lost any jurisdiction you had. Any rulings you make are a nullity, they're void, not voidable, but void right now. You have no more authority to do anything, and anything further you do, you're violating my rights, and you lose immunity, and I'm coming after you. Now, when you stand up to a judge like that, they don't do. Most people, oh, he's up there in them robes, and he's behind that thing, and they're quaking. The judge, I don't want to piss him off. He's a criminal. If he's acting in a criminal manner, call him on it. You know, not all judges are criminals, and always do it with respect, and always do it with law. Don't threaten, never threaten a judge with other than, you know, you've just violated the law and you're in serious trouble. That you can say, you know, correct your error and I won't press charges. But you have overstepped your authority. You are acting in an unlawful manner.
What do you say with love?
With what?
Why do you say with love?
With love? Well, I don't. You're more of the one who says it with love. I say.
What you just said.
Well.
Correct them, not to be respectful.
Yeah, be respectful. I don't love tyrants.
Right.
You know, I want tyrants off the bench. I want tyrants out of politics. You know, then we'll have the country that we should have.
So you do it for love for their soul? When you say, because a tyrant is violating?
That's the way, you know, you and feminine and your girly thing, you know, tend to be that way. I in my masculine thing don't quite see it that way, you know.
How do you see it?
Huh?
How do you see it? Getting remedy?
Well, no, since they have always tried to bring us to justice as criminals. Oh, you smoked marijuana, you deserve time in jail. You know what I mean? That justice is you turn that around. You turn that around. When you've committed treason, you're responsible for your actions. You know, not because you're the President of the United States or you're the Secretary of State like Hillary Clinton. Oh, it's unexcusable that you've used drones to kill innocent people, you know? It's not unexcusable. You know, just because you think you're the Secretary of State and you believe the Secretary of State has that authority. Well, the Constitution never said the Secretary of State had the authority to do the things that our Secretary of States are doing. And the Constitution also never said authority delegated. You say, we give authority to the President. We didn't give authority to the President to give that authority away. We didn't say, okay, now that you're the President, you can create the FBI, you can create the CIA, you can create, you know, all these things and give them power and authority that we the people didn't even give to you.
You're spawning new governments under corporate law?
Right. No. The Constitution laid out specific authority that the President had. Authority delegated cannot be redelegated.
Right. But all these agencies have their rule books.
No, but it was all done illegal. The President did not have the authority to create all these things. And now let those things make laws for us. If he had created those things really to watch out and protect the people, he has the authority to do that. But he doesn't have we didn't say, we the people give the President the President the authority to regulate we the people. We didn't give them that authority. It's not in the Constitution.
I think it's 58 minutes.
All right. Wonderful. It's 58 minutes and I'm done. I'm out of here.